Welcome to Project Likutei Sichos. This week, Parshas Yisro. We're learning the second Sicha of Parshas Yisro in Chelek Tezayin on page 203. In the heintige Seder wird erzählt. In this week's Parsha, the Torah relates, as when Yisro had gesehen, wie Moshe Rabbeinu sitzt, lishbeit es ha'am min ha'boika ad ha'erev. When Yisro observed that Moshe Rabbeinu is sitting from day until night, from morning till evening, judging all the people, answering all their questions. Hat zu ihm geteinet, so Yisro said to Moshe Rabbeinu, Madua ata yoshev levatcha v'chol ha'am nitzav alecha min boika ad ha'erev. Why do you alone sit and answer all the questions for all the people from morning till night? Novel tibol gam ata gam ha'am gomer. You and the people will be worn out from this setup, that you're the only one that could answer them the questions. Und hat ihm gegeben die Eitze, and he gave him the advice that you should see to it to appoint other people, judges, that will help you answer the questions. As Moshe zal auskleiben, sorry alafen v'geime, was wel mishpetim b'choleis, ministers for the thousands and so on, that will come and judge Yidden all time. Blois hadavar hagadol yavia elecha. Only when there's a big matter that has to be brought to Moshe Rabbeinu will it be brought to him. Und durch hazan hage, when you'll do it in this way, is v'yacholta moed, you'll be able to stand. V'gam kol ha'am hazel mekayme yavi b'shalim. And this will also bring peace for all the people, that they won't have to just stand in line to come to speak to Moshe Rabbeinu when there's no one else available to answer their questions. This is what Yisro observed, and this is the advice that Yisro gave. Is yidua dit me and them. So the question on this is known. Wie kommt es? How is it possible? As Moshe Rabbeinu, Raya Mehemna Shal Yisrael, Moshe Rabbeinu, the faithful shepherd of Yidden, hat allein nit choishish gewen, as ein Eifen anhage can defeat into novel Geime ha'am Geimer. Moshe Rabbeinu was not concerned that he alone, judging all Yidden, answering all the questions, will bring to it that he and the Yidden will be worn out. Und es ist ihm nicht eingefallen, the Eitzah chi pshuta, and he didn't think of this simple idea, to appoint other judges to assist him in judging the people. Und Dafke Yisro, Kayin Midyan. Yisro comes from far, and he's a priest from Midyan. Was ist gekommen auf a kurzen Zman, he comes for a short while. Hat das verstanden und ausgeführt. He understood this, and he actually achieved this. He gave the advice, and Moshe Rabbeinu got Hashem's agreement, and this is what was done. So how could it be that only Yisro noticed this and came up with this idea, which is so obvious and so simple? There's a saying that people say, a gast for a while, zet of a mile. A guest that comes for a while can see a mile. Und darf gerene, was es da vernot, kann einmal versehen, a fil an einfache Sach. Sometimes someone that's here, a permanent resident in an area, can overlook something which is obvious. So we can say that that's the same thing that happened over here. Moshe Rabbeinu, the Yidden that were all together in the Midbar, did not notice this. Yisro comes for one day or for a short while, and immediately he notices this issue. However, this can't be used here. Chas v'sholem zu sagen wegen Moshe Rabbeinu, God forbid to say regarding Moshe, wenn der Rebbe allein hat ausgeklebt als Reue Yisrael mirega hivoldei, who was Rebbe Hashem picks him to be the shepherd of Yidden from the moment he was born, und schon gewend der Reue Neman von Yidden bepoil am Meshach's man, and he already served as the leader and as the shepherd of Yidden for a while, as hat das nicht gewusst, bis Yisro is gekommen und immer Eure gewend wegen them. He didn't realize this, he couldn't pay attention to the needs of Yidden until Yisro came and made him aware of this. So it can't be said that Moshe Rabbeinu did not pay attention to this, to what was here and obvious for him to see. Is the fun gufa verstandig. So we understand from this itself, as by Moshe is gekommen, that it's not that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't notice this, didn't pay attention to this, but Moshe Rabbeinu saw, but he came to the conclusion, umitzad madreges Moshe is es azay be'emes, and looking at things from the perspective and level of Moshe, so this is the reality, as allein ken, that he alone could, und noch mehr, allein darf, sich vernehmen mit mishpetin demam. He must be the one to occupy all his time to answer all the questions of all the Yidden. Sei davar hagadol und sei davar hakotten, whether it's a big matter, whether it's a small matter. Und von deswegen wird das nicht schaden. And nevertheless, there won't be any harm over here. They won't get worn out. It's a setup that will work. Nitim und nit bnei Yisrael, not be harmful to himself and not for the Yidden. That it will be peaceful for Moshe Rabbeinu and for the people if Moshe Rabbeinu himself judges them. So the point that Rabbi is saying is, not that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't notice. Moshe Rabbeinu saw exactly what's going on, but he came to the conclusion that this is the way it has to be done. So that has to be explained over here. Why is that the case? An additional proof to this point here is, as Moshe's anhage, that Moshe Rabbeinu himself judging the people from morning until night is a derech amiti al pitera, is a true and the right path according to Teire, ubemele, wenn es gewiss verhitten, dem novelty begeben. So if you're following the way the Teire designed it to be, so you definitely won't have an issue of novelty, of getting worn out. From the Maimah Chazal, we can understand from this that Chazal tell us as the nomen Yeser, one of the names of Yisro, which is Yeser, or the Yisro, or actually the name of Yisro, is, how did he get this name? Al Shem Sheyiter Parsha Achas B'Teire V'Ato Techse, because he came and added a Parsha in Teire, which is this Parsha of V'Ato Techse, suggesting to Moshe Rabbeinu this idea of hiring and getting other judges. So let's look at the words that Chazal use here. Von dem was Chazal seinen Dome Dayik, Sheyiter Parsha Achas B'Teire, that Yisro added a Parsha to the Teire, which means nit as hat zeich gewen as die Parsha Nemra or the Nichteva al Yodei. Chazal don't tell us that Yisro had the merit that this idea and this section and this part in Teire should be said through him. Wie der Lashon was mir gefindt, benegea andere Parshas in Teire. And that's the expression that's used regarding other parshas in Teire, regarding Pesach Sheni, regarding the request of Bnei Tzlavchad. So there also Moshe Rabbeinu did not know the answer, and they brought up the idea, and they were zeicha that the parsha was said through them. It doesn't say though that they added to Teire. They were the ones that were zeicha to reveal this. But by Yisro it says that he added a parsha to Teire. So it's verstandig. So from this we understand, as nit nor is durch Yisro nisgale geworden, die Parsha from Vate Techse. It's not only that through Yisro this idea, this Parsha was revealed, nanochme, but it's more than this. Yisro hat aufgetan kaviyachol a Yisro v'haisafe in Teire. Yisro accomplished and brought an addition into Teire. Durch him is in Teire zugekommen die Parsha from Vate Techse. Yisro kaviyachol brought an addition, a new Parsha, a new idea into Teire. Was in Teire mitzad atzma is die früher nicht gewesen. In the Teire on its own, before Yisro came with this idea, it was not here. And Yisro adds this to Teire and makes this idea part of Teire. Ubemele is move on, so from this we understand, as Eider, Yisro at Eivgeton in Teire, at Eivgeton, as in Teire, soll zukommen at die Parsha, before Yisro accomplished this, that this should become a part of Teire, is mitzat Teires emes gufe nit gewend de Seder an Hoge von Vate Techse. Teire on its own does not demand that this idea should be implemented, that there should be other judges hired as well. Now, as Moshe allein darf mishpetin dem am b'chol davar. But Moshe Rabbeinu alone has to judge all Yidden in every matter. That's the way Teire demands it from the perspective of Teire on its own. And then Yisro is the one that introduces a new approach and it becomes part of Teire. That's a tremendous chiddush. Und das ist der Tam, was Moshe Rabbeinu, was Kolin Yona is Teire. So Moshe Rabbeinu, his entire essence, his entire being is Teire. Hat sich hazeh gefiert damals. So he conducted himself the way it is from the perspective of Teire itself, that he is the one that has to judge Yidden and answer all their questions from morning till night. But now if this is the case, so then the question becomes on the other hand. Wie bald as euch durch an Hages Moshe is wie cholta amoid v'gam kol ha'am hazel mekayme yavi b'shalom. Since the way Moshe Rabbeinu was doing things, we must say that it would work out and everything would be peaceful and it was possible for him to do. Tofan vanen is neschadish geworden an ort of the chashash von Yisro. So from where came the concern that Yisro had as an Hages Moshe can defeat him so novelty will game, that Moshe Rabbeinu's conduct will bring him to be worn out. And that it's impossible, it's too difficult for you to do this alone. So what's the difference over here in the two perspectives? The perspective of Moshe and of Teire on its own that says that Moshe Rabbeinu has to judge all the Eden on his own. And then the fresh perspective of Yisro that says, no, that Moshe Rabbeinu cannot do it on his own, and he needs the support of other judges to help him with answering the Yidden. Oster inyan. So what we find over here, the way Moshe Rabbeinu intended to do things, and then the way Yisro suggested differently, we find similarly also when it came to the giving of the Torah itself. So Oster inyan b'shaychus to Tainis Yisro, in regards to the claim and the argument of Yisro, nach the luchas shniyas from Yom Kippurim, after the Yidden received the second set of luchas after Yom Kippur, and Moshe Rabbeinu began judging the Yidden and teaching them. As Moshe Rabbeinu hat abgeschätzt sich und die Yidden nicht wie das kommt aus mit Tainis Yisro. Moshe Rabbeinu estimated his abilities and how things will work for Yidden, not the way Yisro saw it. Als kennen und darfen gemischbart werden von ihm allein und lernen von ihm allein, nor chuke elikim ves teiraisov und mishpat von David HaGadol. They have to learn from Moshe Rabbeinu the Torah and all the halachas, all their questions, that they have to learn it from Moshe Rabbeinu himself. This is the way Moshe Rabbeinu saw it, and Yisro saw it differently. So this distinction we find before as well. As ähnlich zu dem, was me gefind frier gleich nach die Aseres Adibris Luchas Harishainis. We find regarding the first set of the Luchas by the Aseres Adibris. And Sheiches zu dem, was Yidden haben geteinet, als kennen it aushalten, Herren, noch Koil Hashem Elokeinu. They can't handle listening to the voice of the Eibishter himself saying the Dibris. Und haben gebeten bei Moshe, and they requested of Moshe, Va'at tedaber eleinu. You speak to us, we can't hear directly from the Eibishter himself. As Moshe had getainet, wie Rashi is mefarish, so when Moshe heard this, Moshe Rabbeinu said, as Va'at, lashon nekeva meint, why does it say, Va'at, that you, Moshe Rabbeinu, should speak to us, and it uses a feminine term, Hitashtem es koichi kenekeva. You weakened my energy like a female. Shenitzta'ati aleichem, I had pain for you, urefisim es yadi, and you weakened my hand. V'chilihaya yafa lechem lulmad mipi agvura, v'loi lulmad mimeni. Wouldn't it be better to learn directly from the Eibishter himself, mipi agvura, and not from me? So here as well we see that Moshe Rabbeinu had one estimation of what Yidden could handle, and yet the Yidden said differently. Das heißt, Leute, wie Moshe hat abgeschätzt Yidden, the way Moshe Rabbeinu saw the Yidden, haben sie gedarft wellen, und sie sind gewöhnt, bei Cheles zu lernen Torah mit Pia Gvura. So he saw that Yidden should want and have the ability to learn the Torah directly from the Eibishter himself. Aber der Eibishter hat angenommen die Teine von Yidden, but the Eibishter did accept what the Yidden requested, Hey Tivu, Kol Hashadiberu, that what the Yidden spoke is good, is true, and Moshe Rabbeinu is the one that said the rest of the Aseres Adibris. Al derech vida, similar to what happens here, in what we're speaking about regarding Yisro's suggestion, as the Eibishter at masking event so atzas Yisro, the Eibishter agrees to the idea of Yisro, biz as das is geworden a parsha in Torah, and this itself becomes a part of Torah itself. Is euch da schwer zu verstehen. So here as well, when it comes to what happened by Matan Torah, it's also, we have a similar question to before. Der Chiluk zwischen dem Madrege von Yidden wie Moshe hat Meshari gewähnt. The difference of the level of Yidden, the way Moshe Rabbeinu estimated them, as they cannot learn mi pia gvura, that they could hear the Aseres Adibris directly from the Eibishter himself, und der Darge von seinem Matzav B'Poyel, and the actual level that they were on, as they darfen lernen von Moshe, and they could only hear the Aseres Adibris from Moshe, is doch man a kotza ala kotza. It's from one extreme to another. Moshe Rabbeinu made such a mistake in evaluating the level of Yidden. Wie verstandig von dem, was die Idee wegen sehr Matze, what bei Moshe Peil gewinnt, hitashtem es keiche kenekeva. As understood from the fact that when Moshe Rabbeinu saw how low of a level Yidden are on, and that they can't hear from the Eibishter himself, only from Moshe, this is a drastic difference. So much so that Moshe Rabbeinu says, I've been weakened like an nekeva. So, wie ist shaykh zu sagen, how is it possible to say, as Moshe Rabbeinu, der Roye Mefarnes von Klal Yisrael, him being the leader and the faithful shepherd of all Yidden, hat ki'ilu nit mechaven gewen. He didn't get it right. He didn't evaluate who Yidden are. Und hat kedekach, and to the point, in dem Abschatzung von Zoin Marisai. And what did he not evaluate correctly? His own people, being a faithful shepherd for his sheep, for the Yidden, he didn't see them for what they are. He didn't see what they could handle. How is this possible to say regarding Moshe Rabbeinu, which is a Roya Neman? So eine von the Biyurim, was me kann sagen in dem. So one of the explanations that could be said about both of these questions here regarding how Moshe Rabbeinu evaluated the Yidden unlike Yisro, and the way Moshe Rabbeinu evaluated Yidden by Matan Torah. Es ist nicht der Pshat, als Moshe Rabbeinu hat sich teuer gewähnt, chas v'shalom, in Abschatzen die Matze von Yidden. We can't understand this in a way that Moshe Rabbeinu made a mistake, God forbid, in evaluating what Yidden could handle. Now the kavanah in them is, rather, the point here is as follows. B'shas Moshe Rabbeinu cooked of Yidden, when Moshe Rabbeinu, with his holy eyes, with his perspective, looks at Yidden, b'shas zeh stein, zusammen mit Moshe, when they are standing on the level together with Moshe, zen ze take be'emes and a hecheren maimud matziv, so the Yidden actually are on a higher level, ba'ofen as they can and learn and makabel zayin Torah mipi hagvura, that they could learn and they could accept and hear the words of Torah directly from the Eibishter himself. And why is this? Weil Moshe hoibt ze auf und is a mekarev zu sein madrege. Moshe Rabbeinu, being the faithful shepherd, elevates Yidden, brings them closer to his level, to be on a level like himself, to be able to receive the Torah directly from the Eibishter. That's what Moshe accomplishes. And therefore, kishem v'yerad gelern Torah mipi hagvura, just like Moshe Rabbeinu himself learns the Torah directly from the Eibishter himself. Azay is eich poil of Yidden. Azay sollen can learn mipi hagvura. Moshe Rabbeinu sees Yidden on the level that he elevates Yidden to bring them to a place where they're able to learn directly from the Eibishter. That was the truth, and Moshe Rabbeinu did not make a wrong evaluation. Yidden haben aber geteinet. So now what was the claim of Yidden if so? So their claim was as follows. Das, was they can learn in Torah mipi hagvura, the fact that they have the ability to learn Torah directly from the Eibishter, is doch the Fall, was Moshe it's because they've been elevated by Moshe Rabbeinu. They on their own are not really there yet, but they've been brought by Moshe Rabbeinu. The power and the revelation of Moshe Rabbeinu is shining into them and elevating them and bringing them to this level. Und der Riber is Zeir Mevukish. What their request is, Zey willen nemen Torah. The Yidden say, we want to take and accept and absorb the Torah mit Zeir Kliyasaga, to be brought on our own level, to understand and grasp Torah on the level that we are on, not in the place that Moshe Rabbeinu brings us to, but into our own level, mit der eigene keiches, to take the Torah and absorb the Torah on our own level with our own keiches. In the Maimah the Matzav Vizezena Mitzaratzmam, on the level that they are on their own, without being absorbed and elevated to the level of Moshe Rabbeinu. So that was their request. So both possibilities are possible. It's possible that they should receive the Torah on the level of Moshe Rabbeinu, and there's this great revelation and this great level that they're elevated to, and here they lose their own identity sort of to some extent, and they're receiving the Torah on Moshe Rabbeinu's level. And then there's the other possibility, that Yidden should receive Torah on their own level and absorb Torah and take it into their own mayach, into their own avana v'asage, with their own keiches, not on the level that Moshe Rabbeinu elevates them to. Und auf dem hat der Eibishter gesagt, and regarding this, the Eibishter says, Hitivu kol asher diberu, that the point that Yidden are saying, the point that they're requesting, that they want to absorb the Torah on their level, is a good idea. Weil in dem Eufen wird die Torah bei seiner Skabel und niklat werden in sehr pnimius. This will give them the ability to receive the Torah and absorb the Torah internally on a much deeper level. Not just to get the Torah on Moshe Rabbeinu's level, but actually to receive the Torah on their own level. So that's the point over here. Moshe Rabbeinu did actually elevate Yidden. They were on a level that they could learn the Torah directly from the Eibishter himself. However, Yidden are requesting to take and absorb the Torah on their level, to be able to take the Torah into their own avana v'asage. And the Eibishter says, yes, they're correct. That is the kavanah. The kavanah is that the Torah should be absorbed by Yidden b'pnimius on their own level. Damit wird werden verstandig dem die kaloschen hitashtem es keiche kemekeva. With this, we could understand the precise wording of the way Chazal expressed this idea that Moshe Rabbeinu says that you've weakened me like an akeva. Was weist nit nur auf a hergish von Zar, nit sta'arti aleichem. What this indicates is that not only Moshe Rabbeinu felt a pain for the fact that Yidden did not want to accept the Torah from the Eibishter himself, nor is be'ike madgish the meaning from chalishus or refisim esyadi, that Moshe Rabbeinu became weakened. So the question here is, Vi pasta chalishus keichesh al Moshe. Why is this weakening Moshe Rabbeinu? If Moshe Rabbeinu is disappointed that Yidden are not ready to receive the Torah from the Eibishter himself, that we can understand the idea, the feeling of disappointment. But the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu was weakened by the request of Yidden, how did this bring a chalishus to Moshe Rabbeinu himself? The asbara is, so the answer and the explanation based on what we said before is as follows. Kedei Moshe Rabbeinu soll lernen Torah mit Yidden kefiret seina. In order for Moshe Rabbeinu to teach Yidden and to give them the Torah like they desire it, va'at tedaber aleinu, that you should speak to us, hat gemusst sich herablassen von sein Madrege. So what the Yidden are really demanding of Moshe Rabbeinu is to come down and teach to them in terms and in a way that Yidden should be able to receive it and understand Torah on their level. Moshe Rabbeinu has to come down. Varam oib, as damals am mehr sein, Moshe begilu mit dem ganzen Teikif. If when Moshe Rabbeinu speaks and teaches Yidden, so the revelation of who Moshe really is will be revealed with its fullest intensity, werden Yidden aufgehoben zu Hazam Adrego, so that lifts Yidden up to a level, Darges Moshe, as they darfen lernen, nit mi many, that they don't learn the Torah. They don't have to learn the Torah from Moshe Rabbeinu, from Moshe, no mi pia gvura. They learn it from the Eibishter himself. So even when Moshe Rabbeinu communicates with Yidden, when he's speaking to them the words of Torah, if he speaks to them the words of Torah not on a level that's brought down to a degree that Yidden could handle it with their own avana v'asage, so then this is a revelation that shines into Yidden that elevates them. So if that's the case, they are on the level of Moshe and they have to learn directly from the Eibishter himself. What Yidden are telling Moshe Rabbeinu, we need you as an intermediary between the Eibishter and us to bring it down on a level that it should be related to us, that we should be able to comprehend this on our level. So therefore it demands of Moshe Rabbeinu to come down to their level. Der Rebbe hat früher gemusst sein, Tosh Koichei shel Moshe Kenekeve. Moshe Rabbeinu has to be weakened, the intensity of his level has to be weakened. Achalishus v'yirida in Madreges Moshe, to bring him down from his intense level that he's on. Und durch dem hat danach gekannt sein, am Mutze zwischen dem Eibishter mit Yidden überzugeben, sei Dvar Hashem. And then he can serve as an intermediary between the Eibishter and Yidden to give them over the words of the Eibishter on a level that the Yidden can absorb and handle with their own comprehension, with their own keiches. That's the Atashtem as Koichik and Akeva. This was really the request of Yidden, that Moshe Rabbeinu should come down to their level. So this explains what happened when it came to Matan Torah. Now, wenn es ist gekommen des Mann, as Moshe soll anheben lernen Torah mit Yidden. So now when it comes to the time after Yom Kippur, when Moshe Rabbeinu comes down and gives the Yidden the second Luchos, so it comes time for Moshe Rabbeinu to teach them Torah. Nachdem, was hat Bekabel gewinnt Torah mit Pi Agvura Bar Sinai, und nach den Sinnes Luchos Schnees bei Yom Kippurim. Hat gerechnet, at this point, so Moshe Rabbeinu figured, as alle in Yonim von Torah, darfen Yidden herren, bei Eufen Yashar, von ihm allein. That all matters in Torah, all details of Torah, Yidden have to learn it and hear it directly from Moshe Rabbeinu. Warum? And the reason is, wie bald as Moshe is there, was hat gelernt Torah mit Pi Agvura. Atzmai. Moshe Rabbeinu was the one that learns Torah directly from the Eibishter himself. Ken doch keine oise im nit ibegeben dvar avaye mit dem ganzen Mervachulu. There's nobody that can give over the words of Torah with its fullest intensity, with the full purity of the revelation of what Torah is, like Moshe Rabbeinu, that received it and learned it directly from the source. Und noch mehr, an additional point, wie bald as is der oimid, as is der anoichi oimid ben avayu benechem goimel lahagad lechem es var Hashem. He is the one that stands between Yidden and the Eibishter to give over the words of the Eibishter. Ubefrat as es schchine mit aberes mitoch groine shel Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu speaks to the Yidden, and the schchine is speaking out of the throat of Moshe Rabbeinu. Kommt eis, as when Yidden herren Torah mit Pi Moshe, is es as zevi ze herren das mit Pi Agvura. It's similar to hearing the Torah directly from the Eibishter himself. So therefore Moshe Rabbeinu thought that it's the most appropriate and it's necessary that Yidden should hear the words of Torah and all the halachas, all the details from Torah directly from Moshe Rabbeinu himself. But thus the Diya Kaloshen, this also explains the exact words that were said here in the Empha from Moshe of the Taina from Yisro, regarding what Moshe Rabbeinu says, regarding the claim of Yisro, that is, why he himself is judging the people and answering all their questions. Because the people come to me and they are seeking to have guidance from Elikim. They want to know what the Eibishter says. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu said. Rashi tied this up, Lishel Talmud mipi Gvura. They're asking me the questions to know what the Gvura, what the Eibishter himself says. Das heißt, what Moshe Rabbeinu meant to say with this is, as das was a learning from Moshe, is as wie Talmud mipi Gvura. They learn from Moshe. It's like they're learning directly from the Eibishter himself. The Shechina medaberes mitech greinish on Moshe. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu said, it's necessary that the Yidden should learn directly from me. Zeis v'oid, this and yet another point here, wie bald as Moshe hyped auf Yidden. Und is in Mekarev zu sein Darge, when Moshe Rabbeinu teaches Yidden, he elevates them, and he brings them to his level. Wollen sie übernehmen die Teire von ihm, al derech wie es Mekabel gewinnt, mi pi Gvura. They will receive the Teire on the exact same level that he received it, like when he gets it directly from the Eibishter himself. B'lashon Chassidus, to use what it explains in the language of Chassidus, Moshe's Darge is Re'iyah. When Moshe Rabbeinu learns the Torah from the Eibishter, he sees what he's learning. He doesn't only hear it and understand it, but he sees it directly. And at Mekabel gewinnt Torah mipi Gvura, and anayfen von Re'iyah, the clarity and the directness and the openness of Torah that's revealed to Moshe Rabbeinu is like when you see something, which is the certainty. When you see something is so clear that nobody could dispute it for you. So Moshe Rabbeinu receives the Torah directly from the Eibishter himself on this level. Is neisav dazu, was man kennet zugleichen, dem Ibnehmen a Sach von einem, was hat es allein gesehen, you cannot compare when you receive something and you understand something, not only by it being explained to you, but when you see it, when someone opens it up for you, and you see it itself, you see the idea itself, that level of clarity, was man nennt von einem, was hat es bloß gehört, so you can't compare that to someone that just hears something, that just explains an idea. Kamayma Chazal, eine Daime Riel Shmir. You can't compare someone that hears something to someone that sees it itself. Hat Moshe Peil gewen durch Eifeib Yidden. So Moshe, when he teaches Yidden, so his influence, what he affected Yidden was, as euch Zeirei von der Kabbalah von Moshe soll sein in der Darge von Riyah, that they as well should learn and understand and receive the Torah on this level of Riyah to see with certainty and clarity the words of Torah the way Moshe Rabbeinu himself sees it. So it's for this reason, was Yidden nehmen der Ashpas hat Torah von Moshe and an Eifen von Riyah, that the Yidden see that they receive the hashpah of Torah from Moshe Rabbeinu on this level of seeing the words of Torah, seeing it with the same clarity like Moshe himself, can und darf nor Moshe allein lernen Torah mit Yidden. So therefore it's necessary that Moshe Rabbeinu should be the one to teach the Yidden. Bis zu allein ze mishpeten, and Moshe Rabbeinu is the one that has to judge all Yidden in alle Zeir in Yonim, in all of their matters. And he will have the ability to teach all of them, and it'll all be peaceful. Moshe Rabbeinu will have this ability. So the Rebbe in the Ha'ara brings the example of what it says in Chassidus regarding Lasad Lavai, that Mashiach will come and teach all the tens and thousands or even millions of Yidden on all kinds of levels, and he'll teach all of them. He'll teach everybody Torah. How will this be possible? Because Mashiach will come and teach with demonstrating the revelations of Torah through Re'iyah. And when you demonstrate and you teach Torah on such a level, so you show it to everybody, it's possible to teach everybody at the same time, and it's possible to teach all these millions of levels and different distinctions of levels of Yidden. So the same thing, Moshe Rabbeinu, elevating Yidden to this level and teaching them on the level of Re'iyah, it's possible for Moshe Rabbeinu to teach Yidden in this way, and it'll be enough time and it'll have the ability to teach everybody. That was the way Moshe Rabbeinu evaluated the level of Yidden. This is the way Moshe Rabbeinu saw it from the perspective of Torah, of how things are intended to be. Und das ist der Reiftu von Yisro. So here comes along Yisro and has a different perspective. Yisro is gekommen mei Arze. Yisro came from his land. Is gewen a ger v'chulu. Yisro was a ger. Hat gesehen Yidden, so from his perspective, the way he sees Yidden, wie sie stehen, so he sees the Yidden on their level, nicht in a matze wie Moshe hyped zu sein Darge. He doesn't see Yidden as they are on a level elevated to be on the level of Moshe. Nor wie sie stehen b'matzavam mitzad atzmam. He sees Yidden for who they are on their level on their own. What Yidden can handle on their own. Und der Pfarr hat geteinet, als der Inyan von Mishpeten Yidden kann it sein durch Moshe allein. And therefore Yisro said, to judge the Yidden, That's something that does not have to be and cannot be through Moshe Rabbeinu himself. Specifically when it comes to judging the Yidden and answering their questions. When it comes to teaching them the Torah, das, was Yidden can come and learn, es a chukim, es a teires, es a derech yelchobab, es a meise, all the details, all the halachas of Torah, is shaykh zu sagen. So regarding this we can say, as das gufe poilt, und demolt werden Yidden aufgehoben zu Darges Moshe. That Moshe Rabbeinu is the one that teaches them Torah, and the Yidden get elevated to the level of Moshe, as if they're learning it directly from the Eibishter himself. Und lernen bedargasai, und the far his heart to Moshe esam es a chukim geimer. So even Yisro sees the value of this and says, yes, when it comes to the Torah itself, you should elevate the Yidden to your level and teach them Torah directly. However, when Yidden come and are asking Moshe Rabbeinu, and they have disputes, and things that have to be judged between them regarding their own personal things, until we're dealing here with arguments that could be between one and another, and they have to straighten out these matters in the presence of Moshe, and they're asking their questions directly from Moshe. So now here, Yidden are not in the world, in the reality of the level of Moshe Rabbeinu, where they're totally removed of their self, of their own personal things and needs. Over here, they're dealing with things that is on their level, that perturbs them, or issues that they have and struggles that they're dealing with, between themselves or between one and another. So here, regarding these matters, they cannot be elevated and they cannot receive the Torah on the level of Moshe Rabbeinu themselves. Here it's the Yidden, Yisro that is, sees the Yidden from their perspective, on their level, when it comes to matters that's relevant to them, not in the world of Moshe Rabbeinu. The matzav is aber, but now the situation, however, is as when the Baalei Dinim stehen far Moshe Rabbeinu, when these Baalei Dinim, even when they do have matters to discuss regarding their own personal arguments and things that are negate to their own asakim, but when they come and stand in front of Moshe Rabbeinu, hat das gufe ze aufgeben von seiner hislapshus und seiner Geschäften. It totally elevated them and remove them from the attitude that they may have had before, where they were immersed in their own things, thinking about what I want, what I need, the way the things should be in my perspective. When you come and stand in front of Moshe Rabbeinu, so then you get elevated and you see things from a different perspective. You see them the way they are in the world of Moshe. Even a child can understand this. As when is in demselben cheder, when he comes into the same room as his teacher, is that anders, wie is for sich und ist vernommen mit seine Sachen. He just acts differently and thinks differently and sees things differently than when he's in his own room privately away from his teacher. So bis zu kennen, von ihm nehmen und lernen, der Mishpat HaTeire in Aneufen von Moshe's Darge. So not only regarding learning the halachas of Torah, the mishpatim and the chukim and the Torahs and so on, that has to be taught by Moshe Rabbeinu himself, and even Yisro understood that. But the truth is, even when it comes to the mishpatim of judging Yidden for their own asakim, for their own personal matters, even this could be done directly by Moshe Rabbeinu himself, because once a Yid comes and stands in front of Moshe Rabbeinu, most of the issues that they thought that they had before would melt away, would not be an issue anymore. So by coming in front of Moshe Rabbeinu, you could accomplish so much more than any other judge that will be judging you. And Moshe Rabbeinu will have the ability to elevate Yidden that come and stand in front of him. Von deswegen, however, hat der Eibishter Masken gewähnt zu Atzas Yisro. So although it's possible for Yidden to be judged all directly by Moshe Rabbeinu himself, but the Eibishter agrees to the idea of Yisro, that to appoint judges. Weil, wenn man darf bewohnen, when it's necessary to think about the future, euch dem Matziv in a time period von Yidden, wenn sie wollen sein, nach dem, wie sie wollen reingehen in Eretz Yisrael, when Yidden will be after Moshe Rabbeinu passes away, when they enter into Eretz Yisrael, when Hinoch Sheichev v'kam Amazeh Goyme after Moshe Rabbeinu passes away, and this nation will be in Eretz Yisrael, and then there'll be new matters and new issues that will come up. As Chach, they will not learn Torah mipi Moshe. They will not have the ability to learn the Torah directly from Moshe himself. Und erheben werden durch him, and to be elevated through Moshe Rabbeinu himself. Soll Torah, wie sie ist, ständig dvar Avaye. So the Torah, which is always the word of the Eibishter, euch demult ankommen zu sei durch die Rashi Alpha Yisrael von dem Day. So we need to appoint these leaders, these judges that should be there for the Yidden available, even though now, while Moshe Rabbeinu is alive. Yes, it is necessary that Yidden should learn directly from Moshe Rabbeinu himself, and even their own personal matters. They should bring directly to Moshe Rabbeinu himself, but nevertheless, the Eibishter agrees to Yisro's idea in order to take care of matters the way they will be in the future after Yidden will not be able to learn directly from Moshe. Und das ist der Tam, für was Moshe hat nicht gehalten, als allein darf das tun. Now we can understand why Moshe Rabbeinu himself was of the opinion that this is totally not necessary. While, because, in addition to the fact, as der Inyan, this idea, as a Roye Yisrael, soll meshane sein Seder an Agosai, zu bewahren in dem Matze von La'acheres Talkusai, that he should change his behavior, the way things have to be now, when he's dealing with Yidden, when it's possible for him to deal with them directly. So he should change his behavior only because of what's going to happen after he passes away. Is a Dvar Chiddush. Is something that's unusual. It's not something that is necessary and that is being thought about right now at all. Now it's a time when Yidden have to learn directly from Moshe. Is doch da nicht gewenken kasolka daitoch of an andere matzev. At that point, when Moshe Rabbeinu was teaching the Yidden when they were in the Midbar, there was yet no thought there could be anything different than this. By lule hachet shela achrezeh, because if not for the fact that Yidden sinned after this, Moshe had gedarft arayfiden Yidden in Eretz Yisrael. The intention was that Moshe Rabbeinu himself will lead Yidden into Eretz Yisrael. Und es wollte gewende Gula Shleima shein achrei Golus, and in that case it would have been the ultimate redemption. Was damit lernen Yidden in Adarga von Riyah. And then Yidden will always be learning Torah on this level of Riyah, seeing things and receiving it directly from Moshe Rabbeinu himself on his level, and it would never be necessary to have another generation after Moshe that has to learn from someone else besides Moshe Rabbeinu himself. So Moshe Rabbeinu didn't envision this, he didn't see this. And therefore it's only the Eibishter that saw the future that agrees to Yisro's idea, to Yisro's suggestion. However, this itself, that we're appointing the judges and the individuals that are going to be there to teach Yidden Torah and to assist, so to speak, Moshe Rabbeinu, and to be there after Moshe Rabbeinu passes away, this itself, the Eibishter wants it to be set up through Moshe Rabbeinu himself. Varom alle inyanim von Torah, everything that there is in Torah, including to the way Torah is going to be taught and transmitted in future generations, have to be set up and come through Moshe. Just like it says regarding Torah in general, everything that any student in a future generation innovates in Torah, it really comes from Moshe Rabbeinu himself. Das heißt, what this means is, afile das was a Talmud vasik in a späten is mechadish. It's a future generation. And the Chazals tell us that we're talking about an innovation. In other words, it's really something that he innovates in Torah. Das is a chiddush von dem Talmud vasik. Is euch das nitten la Moshe Misinai. Even this, in truth, comes from Moshe Misinai. It has to come and be given through Moshe Rabbeinu. Warum, wie bald as the chiddush von Talmud vasik hat ausgeharvet mit sein Seichel. So since we're talking about a chiddush that a student innovates through him on his own, learning and toiling in Torah and bringing with his own understanding a chiddush in Torah, the Rebbe can der chiddush nit sein kin Chelek von Torah's Moshe. If it's something that comes purely from the seichel of a person that learns Torah, even if he learns according to Torah and so on, he's learning Torah. But if it's only your seichel that's being mechadish this in Torah, it cannot be a part of Torah's Moshe. Now, Seiden geht durch Moshe. It has to come through Moshe. This also is given through Moshe. Was demult is this Dvar Havaya Mamish. Only then could this be Dvar Havaya Mamish that's now being brought out and revealed through this Talmud Vasik. So we see this beneged to Torah in general, that everything in Torah, all chidushim of future generations, is something that really comes from the koyach of Moshe. Und das ist, was Yisro hat gesagt zu Moshe Rabbeinu, va'ato techazeh. So this is what Yisro is emphasizing when he gave his suggestion that you, Moshe Rabbeinu, va'ato techazeh beruach HaKodesh she'alecha. That you should see to appoint the people with the Ruach HaKodesh that you have. It's only Moshe Rabbeinu that could put this plan into motion. Moshe darf auskleiben und einstellen mit sein Ruach HaKodesh. Moshe Rabbeinu has to choose and set up with his Ruach HaKodesh. Die Sari Alafim v'Geime, the other people, the ministers, the judges, was wollen Sheifet sein, the Mam, that will judge and teach the Yidden. Und durch den wird bewahrend l'chol ha-deiris. And this sets up things for all future generations. As das was Chachme Yisrael smuchen ish mi piyish at Moshe Rabbeinu, that the fact that you have all the Chachamim of all future generations and that are all getting their smiche until Moshe Rabbeinu himself zenen sheifet Yidden leuten psak din. V'zeh zenen masik mit zeyer seichel, and they're using their own seichel, their own intellect to give up psak din and teire. Is das der mishpat von teires emes teires Moshe, because it was set up originally, and Moshe Rabbeinu empowers the first generation of the judges to teach Yidden, and then they give it over to the next generation, and to the next generation it all is coming and handing down and giving the power of Moshe Rabbeinu that they can teach Teire, and it's the Eibish's Teire, it's Teires emes. Damit wird man euch verstehen dem Diog va'atot techse, nit va'atot tire. This also explains the unusual expression that Yisro said, techse, which means you should see to it. But it doesn't use the usual term of tire, but rather the term of techse, which is really a Targum word. It's a word in Aramaic, not the word in Lashon Kodesh. Oid Moshe soll gucken mit sein Ruach HaKodesh, beifen shel re'iyeh. If Moshe Rabbeinu will look at this matter and see things the way Moshe Rabbeinu purely and directly sees things, Dargas Moshe b'milua b'tokfa, the full intensity of Moshe Rabbeinu's vision, darf man the tzud zu sorei alafim v'gayim etankum. Says as the Rabbi explained earlier, so then Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't see at all, he doesn't envision at all a situation where he's not here teaching Yidden directly. Alle in Yonim gein durch Moshe boifun goli. Everything has to come openly and directly from Moshe. Und allein is Sheifet Alamin, and he alone is the one that judges everyone. Der ganze Am und alle Zeir in Yonim, everybody in all of their matters, side davar gadol and side davar kotten, or rather an important matter or even a petty matter. Davke durch dem was bei Moshe is da yiride me madrigasai. It's only when Moshe Rabbeinu comes down from his full intensity of his level. Al derech, similar to what Chazal say by Matan Torah, he tashed them as kaichi that Moshe Rabbeinu is weakened. He has to come down to the level of Yidden, Kanal Siv Dalid. As anstat re'iyeh, instead of seeing things openly and directly, is by im nor techze. Moshe Rabbeinu sees it on the level of techze. Was his bloy is der targum von re'iyeh. It's a translation in Aramaic of the word re'iyeh. Das heißt, what this means is, wie der Inyan von re'iyeh, Darges Moshe wird abgeteicht. It's the level of Moshe Rabbeinu seeing things but translated. It's brought over. Und nimshach in Targum Lashon. It's brought over into a different language. In Lashon Arami von Welt, which relates to the existence of the world. Or Balashon Chassidus, the expression that's used in Chassidus and Likutei Torah, Acharayim shal bechinas riyah. It's the behind of the open and direct seeing that there is in riyah. Zeter Yidden, so only then could Moshe Rabbeinu see the Yidden like Yisro saw them, wie sie zene mitzad atzmam, the way they are on their level, ubemele dav zayin der Inyan von auskleiben sorei alafim v'gayim. And therefore you have to appoint those ministers and those people that will judge and teach Yidden Torah. That's the diuk of atot techze, that you should look and see Yidden in the way it's translated in their reality, in the way they exist in this world. Und therefore, wird die Parsha angerufen al Shem Yisro. And therefore the name of this Parsha is on the name of Yisro al Shem Sheyiter Parsha Achas B'Teire. That Yisro adds a Parsha in Teire. Weil mitzad Darges Moshe is an understatement. From the way things are, from the perspective of Moshe, from the level of Teire, so things have to be differently. Not the way Yisro sees them. Und noch mehr, in Teire mitzad atzma, in the Torah on its own, Gilui Chachmasi Yisbarach, which is a direct revelation of the Eibishter's Chachmah, was Vertnes Gal durch Moshe, is an understatement. There has to be a different Seder. The things have to be given directly from the Eibishter, directly from Moshe. Yisro hat aber aufgetan, a Yisro und in Torah. Yisro brings an advantage and another perspective into Torah, as euch der Seder von Va'ata Techse, wird a Seder hanhage al pi Torah. That even this Seder hanhage, that Yidden should receive the Torah, and the Torah should come down to their level, that they should be able to absorb Torah on their level, not directly from Moshe Rabbeinu. This idea and this approach becomes a part of Torah itself. There's the etzem of Torah. There's the Torah the way it comes mulmaila from above, that the Torah is given directly to the Eden. And then there's the Torah the way it has to come down and then enter into the reality of Eden to relate to them. And that was the perspective that Yisro brought. So Yisro drew down Torah and brought it down another level. And this is a new Seder Anhage that Yisro brought Torah into. So now, according to this, it would seemingly come out as the Seder from Vata Techze is Loizaninyan from Yeride. This idea of Yisro is bringing down Torah another level, bringing down Torah to the Yidden. Chas v'shalom, Kedei zu bavaren in Yidden, it's bringing down Torah, God forbid, and only to take care of the Yidden, was darfen ankommen zusammen Mutze zwischen sie and Moshe. And they need to have this intermediary between the Eibishter and them, or in this case, between Moshe Rabbeinu and them. Kishem wie Yidden haben gedarft ankommen zu Moshe als am Mutze zwischen sie mit Pia Gvura. Just like the Yidden needed Moshe Rabbeinu as the intermediary between them and the Eibishter. So this seems to be a Yerida. The entire suggestion of Yisro brought about a Yerida in Torah, God forbid. The Pnimiyus on Yonim Abed is Adarabah. But the truth is, on a deeper level, if we look at what Yisro really accomplished, it's to the contrary. Dafke durch dem, was mebavarent. It's only through this, specifically, that you pay attention to this. Hayb toif hayid. Was gefindt sich lamata beyoser. A yid that's found in his situation, in his place, even in a very low place. Nemt men dem gevaya beyoser. Drawing down the Torah to a yid that's on this low level is really drawing from a deeper place in Torah, from the essence of Torah, from a higher level. Then you're able to bring down the Torah to an even lower place. So this is not bringing down Torah, to the contrary. This is revealing a deeper essence in the level of what Torah is, and therefore you're able to bring it down to the Yidden on their level. Al derech v'der Rebbe is Meirich in the Maimari Ha'ilula Shaloi, as it's explained by Arichis in the Maimarim of the Frierdiker Rebbe and Basi Legani. As dafke, tzilib der Aveda Dolamata, that it's specifically for the Aveda of Yidden that's done here below in this world. Where this Milchama, this Aveda in this world entails an intense battle that a person has to deal with his physical body and the Nefesh Bahamis. So l'chayra, this is a tremendous Yerida. This is not a level where the Neshama is in its purity in a higher level. Over here the Neshama has to deal with all this difficulty. But dafke here below for this kind of Aveda is men mevazbez bi'oitzeris achi yekarim. The most precious treasures are squandered and are given indiscriminately and freely for everyone to use. Was biz der Milchama beweist men was biz der Milchama beweist men sehr viel in it. Until this point, until a Yid has to deal with this kind of struggle, it's not revealed and it's not made available to anyone. Und der Ikke mechoven von dem Bizbus der Eitzres is, as es on onkommen, nicht nur zu der Pekilia Chayil. The main purpose here is that these treasures should reach not only the generals, nor to the Anshei Chayil, to the simple foot soldiers, was firen durch der Milchama bepoil, that are on the battlefield, that are there dealing with on their level, on their low level, with the struggles that they have. The Eitzres, Hachi Yekarim, is squandered and given freely to those individuals that are on the lower level. So we see that Dafka, a person that's a foot soldier, that's on a lower level, can access and brings down for the victory of his battle that he has from the deepest and highest place. Und durch them, and through this, für tzachais the kavana al yaina, bringing down the Torah to the lowest level. This fulfills the purpose of creation. Von Nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu liyas le'dir b'tachteinim, the desire the Eibishter had to have a dwelling in the world here below. Und der Eilam haza tachten, shein tachten lamata mimenu, in this world below, in the lowest element of existence, was das wird sein b'shleimus u'b'goli, which will be completed and revealed b'bias Mashiach tzedkenu, with the arrival of Mashiach b'korev mamish.